Welcome to the Blue Mask Knits. My name's Emily, and today I'm going to teach you how to knit this Colorwork cowl. You will need 2 colors of medium number 4 yarn. The main color is the background, which is the light pink here, and the contrasting color will make up your hearts. And to match gauge, I used a US 7 4.5 millimeter needle and a 16-inch cord length. And you'll also need a rib needle that is 2 sizes smaller than the one that you match gauge with. This cowl comes in 2 sizes. This is the extra small size. It's very snug and close fitting to your neck. You could also make this for a kid's scarf. I'll have the measurements listed on screen, but definitely measure the circumference of your neck to where you feel like you're comfortable wearing a scarf. And you can adjust the circumference of this cowl by adding on multiples of 16 stitches. And I think that's pretty much it, so let's get started. Using your rib needles and the main color, cast on either 81, 97, or 113 stitches. We're doing an invisible join in the round that will decrease 1 stitch, so you will have 1 less than this after the join. I'm going to lay my stitches flat so that the kind of ruffled edge here of my cast on is facing towards the inside with the yarn attached to my right hand needle. So I can kind of get my yarn out of the way. Slide your stitches up towards the top and make sure that nothing is twisted. And then to work the invisible join in the round, I'm going to slip the first stitch from my left hand needle to the right hand needle. So I go into the first stitch on my left hand needle as if to purl it, but just slip it to the right hand needle. We're going to slide the second stitch on my right hand needle over that slip stitch and off. So kind of hold on to that slip stitch with your index finger, kind of pull that final cast on stitch up, over, and off. And then you can pull on both tails to tighten everything up. Place a marker for the beginning of round and you're ready to work the bottom hem. So I'm just going to work in a simple knit 1, purl 1 rib. So knit 1, purl 1 all the way around. Once you've knit about 1 inch of ribbing, it's time to switch from our rib needles to our gauge needles. So what we're going to do is knit off of our rib needles onto our gauge needle. So your gauge needle will be your right hand needle and your rib needle will be your left hand needle. So I can remove my stitch marker for now. Pick up your gauge needle as your right hand needle. You can kind of pull out the other rib needle and get it out of the way. And now we're just going to knit around. So go into the first stitch, yarn over, pull through, slide off. And now it's kind of a loose stitch. So when you go into the second stitch, you want to pull a little tighter on the yarn than you normally would. And then just continue knitting normally around the entire round. You can continue to ignore the other rib needle as you go. It will feel a little bit weird. You've got your rib needle over here and your gauge needle over here, but you just keep going. And there we go. You are done with your rib needle. You can put that away. For now, you'll need that again for the top hem. You can place your stitch marker back on your needle. And you want to knit 2 more rounds using the main color for a total of 3 knit rounds. So just do 2 more since we've already finished 1. Before we get started, I want to quickly kind of walk you through how the chart works. So you can find the chart on page 3 of the written pattern, but I'll show it here for you as well. This is a stockinette colorwork chart, meaning that every stitch is a knit stitch. We're looking at color changes and not stitch type changes. So right off the bat, a chart is read from right to left and from bottom to top. So if you look in the bottom right corner down here, on the right column is our row count. And on the bottom, these are our stitch counts. And in a chart, every box is a stitch. You can see them labeled down here. So our first heart section is rows 1 through 8 and stitches 1 through 8. So it makes an easy repeat. So if we were to just look at row 1, which is right down here, we're reading it from right to left. So we start with stitch 1. And stitch 1 is, if we look at our key down here, a white outlined box is a main color. Our first stitch is that main color, and then the second stitch is also in the main color. So we're working 2 stitches in our main color. And then we get to the third stitch here, and that is in our contrasting color. So we're going to work that in our contrasting color. So if I block out the row above it and we just focus on row 1, you start over here in the corner and you read it right to left. We're going to work 2 in our main color because they're a white outline box. And then our third, we begin our contrasting color. and then we work 3 in our main color in a row, 1 contrasting, 1 main, and then you repeat it. What's encased in the blue box is our repeat. There's 8 stitches kind of in that outlined blue section. So once we reach stitch 8, we go back to stitch 1 and repeat it. Works out because our stitch count should be divisible by 8. So after you finish that row, you would move up to row 2, which is this one right here. And you're reading it from right to left. So you would start with this box here, our main color stitch. So 1 main color, and then 3 contrasting, and then 4 main. So the most important thing to remember is that you're reading it from right to left and going from bottom to top. But then once we get up to rows 9 through 16, it looks a little bit different because we're shifting our hearts over a little bit. So let me crop this so it's just showing rows 9 through 16 here. We still have our outline, and the stitches that are outlined in blue, which is this block here, so stitches 2 through 9 of our repeat are going to be repeated. For our second set of hearts, you can see it's broken up over 16 stitches in the chart instead of just 8. And that's because our repeat remains the same. Our repeat is still 8 stitches wide. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But we've just shifted everything over a little bit. So there are still 8 stitches in our repeat. So how to read row 9, for example, we're going to work a setup of 1 main stitch. And then we get to the blue box. So the stitches in the blue box are our repeat. So we're going to repeat these stitches. So you repeat a 1 main, 1 contrasting, 3 main, 1 contrasting, 2 main. So you'll work this repeat until you get down to the last 7 stitches before the beginning of round marker. So then when you get down to the final 7 stitches, you'll work 1 main, 1 contrasting, 3 main, 1 contrasting, 1 main. So you're still reading from right to left. The ones that have the blue outlines here on the left and right side of that row, those are going to be your repeats. Every row will have a setup stitch, and then it will end with 7 stitches that are different than our repeat. So hopefully that makes sense, but I think working this in practice will help even more. So go ahead and grab your second color. There is a chart and then there's written instructions. Personally, I find the chart to be easiest because I can just kind of glance back and forth at it. For round 1, it's 2 main color, 1 contrasting color, 3 main color, 1 contrasting color, 1 main color. But to begin, I'm going to wrap the contrasting color around a finger on my right hand like this. And this is just to give it tension so it doesn't pull out as we're knitting it. I want the contrasting color to be underneath the main color like this. Got my main color up here and my contrasting color down here. I'm going to pinch the 2 strands underneath with my left hand like this. I'm going to place my middle finger in between the 2 strands and then my index finger under both. So the dark pink is our contrasting color and the light pink is our main color. And you can kind of loosen up your grip like this to readjust. You pinch both strands with your final 2 fingers. Middle finger splits them, index finger goes underneath both. So to begin, go into the first stitch like you would normally, and then we're going to go around the back and just pick up the light pink like this and knit it, and then repeat that until you've done 2 main color. It can kind of get scrambled like this where your light color moves forward, but you can readjust your fingers so that the dark pink is a little closer to you. And now we're going to do 1 contrasting. I'm going to go into the next stitch as if to knit it. So you want to make sure that you're grabbing the dark pink from underneath the light pink. So I go in and I grab just the dark pink, which is furthest to the left there. So that was 1 contrasting, and now we need to work 3 main color. Let's go into the next. Go around towards the back or furthest to the right, whichever makes sense to you, and pick up that light pink. Repeat, around to the back, and just pick up the light pink, which is our main color. Round to the back. And now you want to kind of stretch your stitches out on your right hand needle, and we're going to work 1 contrasting color. If your light pink is kind of like this, where it's on top and to the left, this might confuse you. You can kind of just use your finger to readjust it so that the dark pink is furthest on the left. Might make it a little bit easier to scoop here in the beginning. So go into the next stitch and just grab the dark pink like this bring it through. And now you can release that tension yarn now that you've knit a couple stitches, and then stretch your stitches out a little bit and work one main color. So go into the next stitch, go around towards the back and just get the main color. And that was one repeat. So to begin the repeat again, it's two main color. So go into the next stitch, go around towards the back, get the light pink for one, and then do that a second time for two. And now we're going to work our contrasting color. So kind of stretch your stitches out because you're going to have a float here in the back, as you can see. And you really don't want that to be scrunched. So you want to make sure that your stitches are always very stretched out on the right hand. They're not clumped together like they are here. They're spaced out. So now we go into the next stitch and we're going to grab just the contrasting color, which is furthest to the left for me, but it might also be easier to think of it as kind of underneath the main color. And now we work three main color. So go into the next, go around towards the back and pick up the light pink for one, for two, and for three. Now I can stretch my stitches out and work one more contrasting. So go in, and you want to make sure you kind of see that our light pink is on top. Our main color is on top, but with the way I'm holding it, the contrasting color is underneath it to the left. So we're going to pick up just the contrasting color, pull through, stretch it out a little bit, and then one more main color to finish it out. So it might be easier to think of it as three main color, one contrasting, repeated until you get to the final stitch. And your final repeat should end with one main color. If you've been thinking of it as three main, one contrasting, just remember that your final stitch should be a main color. And for round two, you work one main, three contrasting, four main. So I work one main, and then we're going to work three contrasting this time. So go into the next one, scoop up just the contrasting from the left. And your first stitch is probably going to be very, very loose down here. You can just pull on that tail to tighten it up. It will look more normal after you weave in your ends. So after three contrasting, we work four main. So remember to stretch your stitches out on the right hand needle and pick four main from the back or from the right hand side, whichever is easier for you to see. And now that's one repeat. So to begin another repeat, we work one main, three contrasting, four main. And you can kind of see that my main is overlapping my contrasting. Just go around and just scoop up the top, which is our main. And now we need to do three contrasting. So if yours looks like this, you can either just kind of move it so that it's to the right, or you can keep it there and just learn that when you go in for contrasting, you go underneath and scoop up that contrasting. And then it should kind of readjust itself. But if your main is on top, just know that you need to go underneath it or to the left to scoop up your contrasting. So three contrasting and then four main. Remember to regularly stretch out the stitches on your right hand needle. And now we've finished another repeat. So we need to work one main to start the next one. You can think of it as three contrasting with five main in between, but just know that you'll end with four main instead of five. But it might be easier throughout the round to think of it as five main with three contrasting in between. And then just remember to end with four main colors after your three contrasting. Slip your marker. And then rounds 3 and 4 are actually the same. We're going to work five contrasting color followed by three main color. So five contrasting. So go into the first, pick up on the left or underneath, whichever makes the most sense to you. Do that for 5 stitches. Stretch out the stitches on your right hand, and if your main color falls off like this, just kind of pick it up with your index finger, or you could readjust and re-pick up both strands. Now I do 3 main. So with my stitches stretched out, I loosely knit 3 main by picking up from the right hand side or the back, whichever makes the most sense to you. Make sure those are stretched out and do 5 contrasting color. Make sure those are very stretched out and keep going. 3 main color. And you want your floats to be kind of long and loose like this. So there's lots of wiggle room here. If yours look really tight, you may need to go up a needle size in order to get them to be kind of loose and bouncy. And then round 4 is the exact same. So go ahead and do that one more time for round 4. For round 5, you work 2 contrasting, 1 main, 2 contrasting, 3 main all the way around. So 2 contrasting and grab from the left, which is underneath, technically. And then grab 1 main from the back, 2 contrasting, and 3 main. Be sure to stretch out your stitches on the right hand, and that's 1 repeat. So again, that's 2 contrasting, 1 main, 2 more contrasting, 3 more main. Stretch them out and keep going all the way around. And now we can work rounds 6, 7, and 8, which will just be knit rounds all in the main color. So I want to kind of carry the contrasting color with me. So this is what it looks like from the back. You can do this a bunch of different ways, but this is just how I'm going to do it. I'm going to bring the contrasting color over my main color and drop it down. And then just continue on with my main color. Just knit every stitch for 3 rounds. And on rounds 6 and 8, I'm going to twist at the beginning so that we can carry the contrasting color with us. So I didn't pull tight. This is the float right here. So it's just to keep it kind of in line with that marker. And then again at the start of round 8, we're going to twist our yarn again. You can do it whichever way that you prefer. I'm going to do the opposite that I did before. I brought the contrasting over the main last time. I'm going to bring the contrasting color over and the main color underneath. You can do it the same way we did it before. I like to alternate so that I can keep my balls of yarn untwisted and then just keep knitting. So as you can see in this stitch pattern, the hearts alternate. So we have already done rows 1 through 8, which is the first part right here. And now we're going to do the alternating hearts, which are rows 9 through 16. So at the beginning of round, only if you're really looking for it, I feel like you can see it. This heart is kind of split in the middle at the beginning of round, and it may look a little bit weird if you look really closely, but from far away, I don't think it's super noticeable. I contemplated not doing one at the start of the beginning of round, but it kind of makes it look a little bit messy, and to have such a long gap without a contrasting color was actually a lot more difficult, but I always place the seam of my cowls at the back of my neck when I wear them anyway. You're going to re-pick up your strands of yarn, split them with the contrasting color underneath or towards the left, whichever you find easier to follow. And now for row 9, we're going to work 1 main color as our setup. So knit 1 main color. And now we're going to work 1 main, 1 contrasting, 3 main, 1 contrasting, 2 main. So work 1 more in main, 1 in contrasting, and then 3 in main. Stretch out your stitches, 1 in contrasting, 2 main. But for most of it, it will be like 1 contrasting sandwiched between 3 main on each side. So I've finished my last repeat. I've ended with 2 main colors, and now I need to do 1 main, 1 contrasting, 3 main, 1 contrasting, 1 main. So you kind of maintain the 3 main between each contrasting until the final stitch. So you end with 3 main, 1 contrasting, 1 main. And then for round 10, we're going to set up with 1 main color and then 4 main, 3 contrasting, 1 main until we get to the last 7 stitches, and you'll work 4 main, 3 contrasting. So go ahead and work 4 main, Stretch your stitches out and work 3 contrasting. And again, my main color is kind of overlapping my contrasting. So I go underneath it and grab the contrasting. And then 1 main to finish off the repeat, and then it repeats. So it looks more like 5 main and then 3 contrasting. I know it seems a little bit counterintuitive to have the color work written as it is and then change it up for you, but these are just the ways I find it easier to memorize for myself is 5 and 3 across. We ended with 4 main, 3 contrasting. And now for row 11, we're going to set up with 1 contrasting color, and then for the repeat, it's 3 main, 5 contrasting across. So 3 main, 5 contrasting, and then you'll do that until you get to the final 7 stitches, and you'll work 3 main, 4 contrasting. And then row 12 is the exact same, so work rows 11 and 12 this way. Go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back here for round 13. And then for round 13, we're going to set up with 1 contrasting color. Be sure that your right hand stitches are all stretched out. Work 1 contrasting color, and then a repeat of 3 main, 2 contrasting, 1 main, 2 contrasting until you get to the last 7 stitches. Work 3 main, stretch, 2 contrasting, 1 main, 2 contrasting. So you're developing the top of the heart here. So just go ahead and repeat that until you get to the final 7 stitches. Rounds 14 through 16 are the same as 6 through 8. You're just going to knit each round in the main color, and you can carry your yarn up on rounds 14 and 16 the same way that you did on rounds 6 and 8. And that's pretty much the entirety of the cowl. So you can go ahead and repeat that as many times as you want. And then for balance, I like to work the full 16 row repeat a certain amount of times and then end with 1 more repeat of rounds 1 through 8. So here I worked 2 sets of rounds 1 through 16 and then rounds 1 through 8 one more time, just so that the first and last hearts are aligned. And once you've finished your last repeat, you can cut the contrasting color, leaving a tail long enough to weave in. And now we're going to switch from the gauge needles back to the rib needles. So go ahead and grab your rib needles. You can remove your stitch marker for the time being. And now I'm going to kind of pull out the right needle a little bit, and I'm going to knit off of my gauge needles onto my rib needles. So you can just kind of let that hang in the back and ignore it. And then go ahead and knit the first stitch. Bring the yarn around to the front, and we're going to purl the next stitch. You can always knit this last row if you find it too difficult to switch straight to ribbing. But I'm going to insert my needle into the next stitch as if to purl. I'm going to pull a little extra on this tail so that my first stitch is not too loose. Bring the yarn in between the needles to the back and just keep going. You can kind of use your other fingers to hold the other gauge needle out of the way and just continue on in your knit 1, purl 1 rib until you have knit every stitch off of the gauge needle and onto the rib needle. And when you get down to the end, you can just finish your last couple of stitches. And then you're done with your gauge needles. And now we're going to continue on with the rib needles only. You can replace your beginning of round marker. You're going to work in that knit 1, purl 1 rib until you've worked 1 less round than the bottom hem. So I worked 9 rounds at the bottom. I'm going to work 8 rounds at the top. And we're doing this because our bind off is going to kind of act as if it was 1 extra round. We're going to bind off in pattern. If you want a more decorative look, you could go with a tubular bind off, but typically I like to pair that with a tubular cast on. And since I did a long tail cast on here, I'm going to do a similar looking bind off. So for this bind off, you're just going to knit your knits and purl your purls. So our first stitch is a knit stitch. I'm going to knit it. Our next stitch is a purl, so I'm going to purl it. And now I'm going to pass that first stitch over the second and off the needle. So go into it from left to right, pull it up, over, and off, and kind of wiggle out that last stitch so it's not too tight. And now you're going to repeat a knit 1, bind one off, purl one, bind one off. And I like to wiggle after each bind off just to keep it from being too tight. And you just keep doing that. So knit one, bind one off, purl one, bind one off, all the way around. It should start to look like this, and mine has a little bit of stretch to it. If yours does not, try knitting and purling looser than you currently are. And when I get down to the final stitch, I'm going to purl it, bind one off, and then I have one stitch left, so I can kind of pull that out. And then you can cut a tail long enough to weave in. So you can go ahead and pull out that final stitch and thread the tail onto a yarn needle. And now to kind of tidy up this end here, I'm going to find the first bound off stitch, which should be along this first knit column. So where our knit column starts to kind of curl over is the first bind off stitch. So you can kind of pull up on this top edge. So here's my last visible V that is vertical. So I'm looking for where it kind of goes horizontal, which is right about here. So there's the first one underneath it, that's a normal V, and then this one it starts to kind of curl over. So I go underneath both bars of it from front to back, pull through. You don't need to pull super tight, we can always adjust the length of this piece of yarn. So now we look at where our yarn is coming out of. It's coming out of right here. So I go back into the hole that my yarn is coming out of from front to back, pull through. And you want to pull the yarn just tight enough that these two strands here are about the same size as every other stitch. So you can see this is our mock knit stitch right here. I pull it just tight enough until it's about the same size as every other bound off stitch. And that neatens up our bind off quite a bit. If you need a visual for weaving in your cast on and bind off tails, you can find that in my other cowl videos. I'll link one here. So then I thread the tail end here of my contrasting color. I'm going to flip over and look at the right side, and I want to pull on this tail. This is the stitch it's attached to right here. So you can see it's a little bit loose. So I'm just going to pull it until it gets to be about the same size as the other one next to it. And now I can weave it in. I look at a stitch like this, and I'm going to mimic that shape. So I'm going to go up through the bottom, up on the right hand side, gently pull it through, down on the right, down through the middle, gently pull it through, switch over to the next one in line, which is this one right here, up through the middle, up on the right hand side, down on the left, down through the middle. I'm going to split the strand next to it, pull through, trim the yarn, leaving a short tail, and that is how I wove in my ends. So you can go ahead and do the same thing for the cast on and initial contrasting color strand. And at this stage, you can block it or just go ahead and start wearing it. And if you want to knit a hat with a very similar colorwork pattern, you can find my free pattern for that here. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this pattern. If you did, please give the video a like, share it around. All of that really helps the channel out. And I hope to see you in the next one.